Institute for Advanced Technology and Governments. He spent 2 decades working in and around Silicon Valley, but after 9/11, he focused on technologies to support the intelligence community and actually worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency. So as you can tell, Louis has a varied and very rich background and is quite the expert in this field. So again, and he has a very sharp sense of humor. Louis will be participating at our Gov2O Expo, which is May 25th to the 27th in Washington, D.C., and he will be on a panel called Open Source Spying 2010. So I'll let you take it away, Louis.
Hey, thank you very much. Thanks, Laurel, and thanks also to Catherine and the rest of the crew at O'Reilly. I think it's wonderful that you're doing not only in the tradition of your tremendous provision of content, doing a wide variety of webcasts, but that you have a series specifically focused on cybersecurity. I think that's great, and it's why I was willing to and eager to do this particular topic, which is not about the technology per se, and not about the nature of the threats and the attacks per se in cybersecurity, but it's really about how we identify and train and think about the next generations of information security and information assurance professionals who are going to be able to provide the kinds of thought leadership and system building and design and system maintenance and operation for government agencies in particular. That's the topic today, but it's really relevant for the entire technology industry. It's something I care a lot about, and it's something that I think is important to our nation and to other nations. And I'll just, I do have some very basic slides here, but what I would like to do really, looking at the numbers of people participating, and I appreciate everybody showing up, what I'd like to do is really just talk for not too long a time. We only have an hour. I'll talk for maybe half of that, and then get into a dialogue and get out of the monologue so that we can exchange some ideas and answer some questions and really explore where this entire space is going. To drive that a little bit, I'm going to pose 2 particular questions around problem areas. If you really think about this big topic, problem 1 is that our current generation of highly trained, highly professional information security technologists who work at every government agency, and in particular the real cathedrals of information security for the government, so the Department of Homeland Security, the National Security Agency, the rest of the intelligence community, the Department of Defense, but every government agency at the federal, state, and even local levels, where chief information officers and IT professionals now have to have cybersecurity within their portfolio as a dedicated area of expertise and of real daily attention because of the threat of enormous volumes of attacks on government systems in particular. Their skill sets, unfortunately, have largely been crafted in an era where system security and network security were not on the first, sometimes not on the second or third tier of skill sets that people were hired against. They were hired because of technical proficiency with being able to design and build and architect and deploy and maintain systems, not necessarily in being able to secure them. And the nature of threats obviously has changed tremendously with the profusion of network connections over the Internet. So the first real problem is how do we train and retrain and do lifelong training with our current generation of professionals. That's really problematic. I call it a vast sucking sound not only is the volume of attacks for any individual government entity and its systems, particularly those that are facing the public, but including those that they think of as behind firewalls. The vast second sound is that we have enormous numbers of hiring opportunities, and one of the biggest fronts in the area of hiring professionals to take care of government systems is in a new wave of national security organizations that are addressing this problem. So you have had, over the last 6 or 7 years, the National Security Agency dedicate a great amount of time and energy into its own recruiting on U.S. college campuses primarily, in increasing their internship programs at the NSA, and in hiring among industry professionals to move from the private sector to work for NSA. And that growth is going to continue at NSA. And I was speaking with a group of their senior executives just last week, and they are very concerned about their ability to hire and recruit people in a very competitive environment with industry. They're not worried about retention. They actually do a very good job of care and feeding of their IT professionals, and particularly of the kind of cyber ninja crowd that they tend to attract and hire. But it's just that those kinds of individuals with their specialized skills 10 years ago, NSA really stood out in terms of career paths for young people coming out of college with these sets of interests and skills. Now the NSA is just one of many, many government agencies, and certainly among the private sector, in trying to hire people. DHS, which is only 6 or 7 years old itself, also with its National Cybersecurity Division, has been, I wouldn't call it an equivalent hiring binge, but they've certainly been attracting some very good, very high quality individuals in this arena, and that's going to continue. But then, talk about a vast sucking sound. You have entirely new organizations which have just and are just standing up now, this year, next year, to address this problem head on. So we now have a 4-star led cyber command, and its work will oversee and direct the work of 3 new commands in the armed services, with the Army, the Navy and their 10th Fleet, the new 24th Air Force, each of them dedicated solely to cybersecurity and its closely related issues. New commands, cyber command, tremendous need for new personnel and for highly trained and specialized personnel. So the military is rapidly trying to reconfigure several of its specialized career designations, so that individuals, as they come into the military, and remember we have an all-volunteer military force, so we're not talking about the draft producing a large number of people across a broad spectrum of the young American public. We're talking about an all-volunteer service where people come into the military, in many cases, with careers already in mind. And if they don't include cybersecurity, then it's very much a challenging prospect for the United States military to plan for the numbers of professionals it's going to need in the Army and the Navy and the Air Force, as well as Cyber Command itself. Cyber Command is not going to be an all-uniform command. They're going to rely very significantly on a civilian workforce as well. but they are aggressively now planning for how they're going to do that recruiting. So this is a large set of challenges for the federal level of government. And when you think that, when you realize that these are all going to be competitive nationally in a marketplace where the private sector is becoming far more aware of and concerned about properly the challenges of securing their own systems. And when you want to secure your own systems, it's less likely that that's an IT aspect that you can outsource. So you at least want to have some in-house capability for information security and protection of your, particularly your most critical corporate information assets. So the competitiveness of the marketplace is exploding, and so that's going to be a challenge that's only going to get worse for government hiring. The second and related problem is not so much talking about current generation of people, but where they're going to come from. The need for these professionals is definitely outpacing the numbers that are being produced as graduates from our high school and college levels. Graduates who already have some knowledge and expertise in information security. In the private sector, we have Microsoft, all of our software competitors, hardware companies concerned about supply chain, the role of security within the supply chain in the larger issue of cybersecurity. We're all competing for the most talented among college graduates in particular. And I make a point here on the slide about from the widest spectrum of college backgrounds. One thing that we have definitely begun focusing on is recruiting for information professionals from an expanded universe of the education world. And by that I mean that if you think about the kind of image of hot startups recruiting from great computer science and EE majors from elite schools like Carnegie Mellon or Harvard or Stanford or the UC system or my undergraduate institution, the University of Virginia, world's finest university, I think generally acknowledged. Go Cavs. One of the issues is that traditional four-year universities are not the only source for information technology professionals, and it's often very difficult for recruiters, particularly in the government arena, to open their minds to recruiting among among non-traditional sources, particularly two-year institutions. And one thing that many of us were struck by last December 2009 was a very important report released by the National Governors Association, talking mostly about state level, but with lessons very relevant for federal and even local government entities. The Center for Best Practices of the National Governors Association released a report called Increasing College Success, a Roadmap, and described some startling figures about college completion rates and the kinds of programs of study integrating career and technical education with academic coursework, and the increasing importance and value of two-year college degree or certificate programs. We're not turning out enough students from our high schools with a solid grounding in STEM or science, technology, engineering, math, the kinds of technical competencies that we need for future generations of cybersecurity. And so it's important that we pay attention to this universe of private and sometimes publicly funded two-year colleges, which have seen, particularly in the recession, have seen double-digit growth in enrollment and which have been investing in their own STEM education tracks, so that these two-year colleges are actually turning out non-traditional students who have the motivation and the educational background now to fill some of these IT professional and cybersecurity professional slots, and it's a definite channel that government organizations need to be aware of in their recruiting plans as they are looking to, and there's a reference to the report on the slide there, as they're looking to recruit the next generation. Let's see, a couple more points I want to make are that the types of threats which are changing are definitely going to influence the way that we train and educate this next generation. We live in a connected world. The kinds of social media explosion and the far wider access to internet connectivity in nations around the world has meant that the kinds of threats that even local government systems face are international, unpredictable, widespread, at a volume that is way off the scale of what government organizations have typically had to secure against. And so the kinds of skills that our next generation needs are in many ways equivalent to the same skills that the attackers are developing. Many of these attackers are young. They're not necessarily the kind of prototypical, stereotypical young lone hacker in terms of that's their sole motivation, doing it for fun, as it used to be in the good old days. In many cases, these are formerly lone young hackers who now have been recruited, sometimes unwittingly, into large international networks, in many cases sponsored by transnational criminal groups and state and non-state sponsors who are able to, in the same way that they're able to commandeer tens of thousands of hijacked machines unwittingly into large-scale botnets and use them, they're able to do the same thing with young, sometimes mixed motivation, highly skilled information warriors operating on their own as hackers. And it's the coordination of those efforts that really becomes a challenge. So we need to really think very flexibly about how we hire the exact same kinds of individuals, bring them into the light and into the public sector careers, where they're able to use those same kinds of flexible, new Web 2.0 skills in the protection of government systems. The kinds of those kinds of skills are obviously in demand. Every individual wants to think that they're going to be able to create a new startup or work for a hot new startup, and sometimes the issue of working for government is, from a career outlook, is not necessarily seen as the world's most exciting career path. So government agencies at all levels need to rethink what their appeal to public service looks like. We had, I think, some very positive expression of this with the new administration and with some of the programs that were set up to support entry into public service. But none of those were focused on the IT world and the engaging the youth of America at earlier and earlier ages in secondary and college education into going into government service from an IT and particularly from an information security perspective. So I think that's something that federal and state government can incorporate into their hiring practices. That's pretty much all I wanted to say, other than that from a corporate perspective, the kinds of lessons learned that we share with government on hiring, training, and retaining information security professionals. Microsoft and other large software companies have had to dramatically change the way that that we recruit, the way that we train internally to retool career professionals, and I think some of that flexibility will be valuable for government agencies going forward in their hiring. So we're almost at the bottom of the hour here, and I wanted to make sure we had enough time for questions. Laurel, I don't know if you had any observations or questions first. I'm going to look here on the
Oh, sure do. No, those notes are just for me, so I'll lead you through them. That was great, Louis. That was really interesting. My first question was really like just a clarification. So hackers don't have Ivy League educations or University of Virginia educations. So are you sort of describing to us a sweatshop where people are equipped enough to understand how computers and systems work that rogue governments or these agencies will put them in a room and just have them ping or send out worms or to various agency sites without necessarily...
I see where you're going, where the question's going. Let's explode a couple of myths here. 25 years ago, a guy named Stephen Levy wrote a great book called Hackers. And in it, he described what he then called this new young generation of hackers. And this was before the Internet, it was before the World Wide Web, and so before the explosion of websites and hacking websites. But he was describing a generation of people who were hacking new systems. One of the best, it didn't have fully the same negative connotation that hacking does today, and certainly not this kind of monetarily or espionage-motivated notion of international web hacking that we have today. One of his primary subjects in that book was Bill Gates. Bill Gates did have an Ivy League education. Admittedly, he was a dropout from Harvard, but he and many other Ivy League, I don't want to diss the Ivy League at all because, guys like Mark Zuckerberg came from the Ivy League. And from university educations, Sergey Brin and Larry Page came from Stanford from a graduate computer science degree program. They never finished their PhDs, but they spent many years in their PhD programs, and yet they were doing the equivalent of, hacking a new enterprise out of non-traditional information technology. So the universe of where people are going to come from and where government particularly needs to focus in its recruiting is a broad and multivariate one. We absolutely need to work to support and nurture educational organizations at the secondary level, and there's been more funding going in the last year invested into science, technology, engineering, math programs, but certainly not enough. We need to continue to increase the degree of public and private investment in supporting educational, traditional educational programs at the secondary level. Universities have traditional four-year and graduate programs absolutely need to work hand in hand with government, both in terms of understanding the needs of government so that they can produce qualified graduates for government recruitment, but also government needs to understand what the trends, needs to do a better job of understanding what the academic trends of where university graduates are going, but in this competitive market space of hiring people. Microsoft and our competitors, we're aggressively hiring off of university campuses. So I'm not really describing a kind of sweatshop of uneducated but highly proficient IT script kids who can pull these kinds of things off as being necessarily a great approach for government, but I do think that the world of non-traditional two-year institutions in the United States, with its hundreds of thousands of graduates, needs to definitely be considered by government organizations as a valid and important channel for technology professionals.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I meant, I mean, are we battling like the foreign agents and bad guys just have rooms?
Well,
or
and them sitting in hacker sweatshops?
Yeah.
Are we battling them for the recruitment of these people? Yeah, sometimes.
Well, no, I mean, you're placing an emphasis on traditional education and ways of finding qualified people, but where do the rogue agents get the qualified people from? Or you just need a few and just disseminate?
Well, a couple of things. One, since today's topic is about government, so we're talking about government's ability to recruit and retain. So internationally, other governments are facing the same challenges, and once you get past a certain top tier of first world nations and include within them some standout nations with real dedicated investment in technology education, the China, the India. Once you get past that tier of top tier educationally invested focus on technology education, you wind up having a set of national governments within whose boundaries the most proficient and talented IT professional young people are not working for the government. They're working for either nascent startup communities, that would be on the good side, or they're working for more nefarious cyber activities, and that would be on the bad side. And so, yeah, we absolutely are facing hackers and sometimes international and transnational entities who are putting together consortia of, and I said when I was talking, sometimes unwitting participants who are engaging in cyber crime. So that becomes attractive because it's a paying gig, and it's not going to be as a clear a delineation of good guy government degree-bearing white-collar IT professionals here in the U.S. versus hacker sweatshop resident script kiddies across the globe, but elements of it certainly do look like that.
Well, that leads into a great question from the chat room. You would think that cyber warfare professionals would really have to have a unique combination of personality, skills, and would the best educational cyber warfare defense programs be associated with these unique personalities versus with specific universities or programs? Or, maybe is the work so clandestine that you would only do something in relation with a university?
Well, it's really the important thing is to take a full spectrum approach, so that in your recruitment you absolutely have the capability of recruiting. If you think about an intelligence agency and the way that they know very well how to recruit people to provide information. So an intelligence agency of any nation tries to recruit sources who will provide information, and they have to be very flexible and multivariate in terms of who they can recruit. They try to recruit government insiders and senior officials from opposing nations. They try to recruit mid-level bureaucrats and office functionaries who can swipe a piece of paper out of a file cabinet without it being noticed. They try to recruit people who are just work-a-day, janitorial staff, because they often have the best access to information. And they also have to be open to walk-ins from a broad spectrum of life because people have unexpected connections with individuals who do have information. It's very similar in terms of how, in today's economy, how you need to think about where you're getting the next generation of information professionals. Because as we've seen from who actually forms startup companies, it can range from Ivy League or Carnegie Mellon computer scientist graduates right down to people with a high school education. And sometimes people during a high school education. Those are people who absolutely can provide value to government organizations. There have been many examples at the local level where local governments have had Web 2.0 systems proposed to them and sometimes accepted and adopted, that were built by high schools, either a high school team within an official sanctioned high school program, and they put together a Web 2.0 mashup that they used local sources in and provided it to local government, or a high school kid who just wanted to hack something together and built a neat little mashup that wound up providing great public service, citizen engagement. Those examples are ones that if local governments who are strapped for funds and don't necessarily have the talent to be able to do that full time, they're open to that, and I think that federal and state agencies need to be a little more creative in terms of whom they recruit, how they recruit them, how they structure their professional relationship. It may not be a full-time job, maybe a consulting gig, but to be able to do that flexibly with people with all kinds of backgrounds is definitely going to be important.
Well, that's a good follow-up question here. Is someone's recounting their experience finding that more than a certain percentage of the cybersecurity jobs for federal government and defense contractors are within 40 miles of D.C. Is there a problem with this geocentricity, and do you think potential hires may be turned away with the prospect of having to move to D.C.? Because we all know with startups, the whole point is you can do those anywhere and in your basement wearing pajamas.
Absolutely. I think in one way, the new military focus and the new military commands that I mentioned are going to lead to a little bit more geo-disparity in terms of the career prospects, both for new young graduates and in some cases because of military relocations that are going on with current existing military professionals who may want to be able to, with additional training, switch to a cybersecurity career track and have a little more geographical flexibility about where they're going to work. The other thing, though, is that I mentioned just how competitive the private sector is getting to jobs. One thing that government organizations at the state and local levels are going to find as they wake up to, the same way that they did probably by reading in an O'Reilly publication, a state or local CIO realizing 2 or 3 years ago, wow, this Web 2.0 wave I thought it was just a buzzword. It turns out it's real. You can actually do valuable things in citizen engagement and provision of services to citizens through nifty websites. I need to get me somebody who knows something about building such websites. So they all started to go through that over the last 2 or 3 years, and there were job prospects created across the country because of that. I think the same thing's happening now, beginning to happen in cybersecurity. We've always had information security, information assurance professionals in most large state, and even sometimes, depending on the locality, local IT shops. You've always had a dedicated person or two who was, he's the security guy. Now, because government sites are becoming such attractive hacking targets, both for the value of the data and also just because of visibility, the hiring decision, I think that light bulb's going to go on as well across the country that, I need to take this just as seriously. Cyber may be a buzzword that's being attached to anything and everything, but as a local or state government IT professional, a CIO who needs to take the security of our systems as they become more interconnected, as they're more public-facing, and as we're collecting and sharing more government data, we do need to take more seriously our hiring needs. So I think you'll see that bubble of the kind of DC centricity. I think you'll see that even out over time.
Well, here's a good follow-up question. What about security clearance? Jay asks, some folks with these skills can't get clearance, so the pool of potential employees is already capped.
That is a definite problem. I had an exchange yesterday by email with a guy on our team who was following a set of awards given to high school students in a STEM contest, and the list of surnames of the top 10 award recipients. There's a way to look at it where this is wonderful. This is the melting pot that is America. 8 of the last 10 were Asian or Indian names, and the other 2, not sure what they were. Mm-hmm. That's a great thing for America that in our secondary and college, high school, in our educational system as a whole, that the diversity of our population is being reflected. That's a strength. On the clearance issue, you have to think, okay, for first-generation immigrants, it's very difficult to get a clearance. And it's possible, maybe likely, that many of those kids in that competition who, cybersecurity savvy CIOs might think, I'd hire any of the 10. If you're going to hire somebody to something that needs clearance, it's very possible that many of them were second or third or 10th generation Americans, and that's not an issue, but it will be an issue for newer immigrants. And I see on the panel on the Q&A list there that somebody also asked about, does the government hire hackers? Yes, the government does hire hackers, particularly federal government, and particularly some of the agencies we've talked about, sometimes in a full-time mode, sometimes as consultants. And the government has also made a much bigger effort, the federal government agencies, as we've talked about, such as we've talked about, make a very big outreach effort to the hacking community, the black hat community now.
So it's not unusual to see government, or maybe not representing themselves outwardly, but at black hat conference and stuff, kind of it out?
Actually, what I'm pointing out is they were always there, not representing themselves. Now they're actually doing it representing themselves, because it's definitely in the government's interest to try and at least start to have some visible profile and dialogue with the hacking community. So, no, it's actually, the FBI has done a great job of reaching out to that community and to try and engage to the degree that it's possible and welcome. And so you wind up having, we're talking here about career development, basically, for young people as they're planning careers. Everybody knows the appeal. Look, I was in a punk band when I was 19. I mean, everybody wants to wear a black T-shirt when they're a kid and to fight against the man, and that's an important cycle of life. At some people, at some point, for everybody, but at some point people start to realize, I also want to have a good job, to support a family. I want to be a professional in the things that I care about. And it's that kind of professionalism that they begin to seek, whether it's through a traditional education, whether it's through the online availability of, training modules with O'Reilly. There's a wide variety of ways that people can develop their skills, and I think that it's important for government agencies to adequately portray and then support the notion that there's a wide variety of ways that you can exercise those skills professionally, that you can have a career with government.
And the government itself would have to be portrayed as sort of a cutting-edge industry as well, right?
There you go, and that hasn't necessarily...
Right. Well, that kind of leads to this next question from Ross, which is, with cloud computing on the rise and other innovative technologies, are students' curriculum really being prepared with innovation as discipline to combat the problems of the future? Are we always going to be this catch-up game?
I think it's possible that we always, if you think about it, it's definitely likely that with government we always will be in a catch-up game, because true innovation is occurring at warp speed in the private sector, in the startup community, within large and small commercial enterprises who are driven by the warp speed demands of competition. Within government, you don't necessarily get that same dynamic, and so in the kind of Gov 2.0 arena that we talked about, that you mentioned at the top of the hour with the Gov 2.0 Expo coming up, you really need to constantly whip and prod government into innovative practices. And there are a lot of great, talented, now well-motivated Gov 2.0 and Web 2.0 and now cybersecurity professionals in government who understand exactly that they need to emulate and follow the speed and flexibility of the private sector. I think it's incumbent on educational administrators at the high school and college level to try to do the best they can in terms of revectoring their curriculum. Many of them have been doing that. It's understandably very difficult in an era of very constrained government resources. I know it's weird saying that at a time when it seems like we're spending more money than we ever have. Well, actually, we are spending more money than we ever have, but certainly, I don't know of any gold-plated programs going on in education. Education seems to be like the poor stepchild of government sometimes, and it's absolutely critically important that educators do the best that they can. Often, we as a company and other companies in the technology sphere, we're perfectly willing and really eager to work in innovative ways to support new programs and new ways of delivering quality education in technology. So we're always open to new ideas there to help educators stretch their funds.
Well, maybe we have to kind of look at this problem a bit differently. Another question was, what about the policy of training military members who maintain the DoD infrastructure? There's a huge mess with continuity and lack of training and understanding. Is it expected to hire more of these college recruits to bring in civilians into that, or would you go through that midlife retraining, or just keeping everyone really current?
Yeah, they're having to do both, and I've talked with the G6 about this, and the Navy CIO and different individuals about. They've been changing the career designations and career tracks, and the bureaucratic apparatuses that surround all of these job proficiencies as a part of standing up the new commands that we were talking about. So the new Navy 10th Fleet is part of a a large-scale transformation of the Navy that includes the combination organizationally of the old N2, so the head of naval intelligence, and all of the intelligence professionals that fall below him or her, combined now with, in one person, with the old N6, the communications and network specialists who actually run all of Navy comms. Those disciplines have now been combined, and many of the Navy professional job designations and so forth are being changed and rewritten in order to try and do what the questioner was getting at, trying to actually be able to think anew about how both mid-career and early career training goes on, about having modern-style career professions and tracks available to be able to make recruiting more attractive. But I say they're trying to do both. They're definitely going to have to continue to rely on civilian expertise. So as well as the uniformed, the non-uniformed population within these commands, the 24th Air Force, the Navy's 10th Fleet, and certainly Cyber Command, the non-uniform proportion of workers is definitely going to be significant because that's a catch-up game that the military is going to be playing for quite a while, and that's an obvious there's a kind of yin and yang, good and bad side to having an all-volunteer force. It's a wonderful thing for the nation to be able to support that. It also means that you have a certain pool of military talent every year that you have to work with, and training and retraining absolutely becomes critical, as well as being able to supplement that with the civilian stuff.
Well, that kind of leads into this question. There has been some, it's been seen that the outsourcing of IT is a demotivator. So how do you encourage students at the very basic, early level to go into IT, and that there is a future in IT, not just a future, but a very lucrative career if you do something really specific, like cybersecurity?
Yeah, and I see in the question it says, how soon before the government sector figures out how to do the same? I was listening to an interview with Warren Buffett, I don't know, about a month ago on TV, and somebody asked him why he bought one of the nation's top 5 railroads last year, and said, it seems really old school, old tech. Why'd you buy a railroad? And Warren Buffett said, the one thing when you look at railroads, the railroads are here. They're in America. We're not going to be shipping our railroads overseas. This is where they are. So it's not going anywhere, and I like that aspect of it as an industry. In some ways, talking just about government and government, U.S. government IT professions, for cybersecurity needs, I don't see any significant outsourcing of that. Certainly not outsourcing to the Far East or other developing countries. Government obviously has an interest in trying to do more with less, and in the Web 2.0 era, there are many ways in which you can crowdsource and derive tremendous benefit from having non-government paid-for systems and data and computer activity going on. But in the arena of cybersecurity, this is one that, for important and obvious inherent reasons, I don't think there's going to be much offshoring of those capabilities. So as a demotivator for young IT aspirants who want to get into industry, that is an issue, and it's something that, again, underscores the need to work with educational institutions on the part of the private sector and U.S. government to ensure that there is appropriate awareness of the career possibilities and career tracks for young IT professionals. They don't need to to move to India or China to get a tech job. There are wonderful career avenues and possibilities here in the U.S.
That's an interesting idea. So you could actually go into IT thinking, well, my best outlet, my most secure position could actually be working for the U.S. government because they would never will outsource my job. Yeah. Huh. Well, actually,
not going away.
No, we're not going away anytime soon, that's for sure. So one of my questions was, obviously enterprise and government are fighting for the same resources, but do you see some kind of collaboration possible or coalition, as in we all face a number of serious problems? Is it worth everyone kind of getting together and working together?
Yeah, and so I was trying to be careful in the last answer to particularly to distinguish between offshoring and outsourcing. I mean, there absolutely is great work being done by, great companies like HP, and with their acquisition of EDS, they secure a lot of government systems. The traditional Beltway bandits. Oh, I'm sorry, did I say that? Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, SAIC, CSC. They have armies, legions of highly trained, highly talented cybersecurity professionals who today are working in government offices, in government network operating centers, securing that data and those networks. And that's absolutely critical for government because there certainly aren't the equivalent numbers of trained professionals as government employees to be able to handle those jobs right now. I think it's in both sides' benefit that they take a kind of joint strategic view to what's in the national interest, and in the national interest is that government continue to have its own channels for recruitment and retention of information professionals so that we don't see, in my mind, there's nothing attractive about entirely outsourcing government systems to the private sector, and that the private sector sees in its interest a robust U.S. government-led ability to understand and design and protect and secure national systems. And that's why I think you see such great participation by the corporate sector in the kinds of cybersecurity efforts that the government has kicked off over the last couple of years. We've all been providing advice and counsel, and in some cases technical expertise to both the research arena that people like DARPA and DHS have been establishing for new ways of securing systems, and also in the identification of the critical infrastructure protection challenges that the nation and the private sector jointly face, our energy systems, the infrastructure of American industry is absolutely something that CIP needs are being defined and re-architected by joint effort, government and the private sector. So there's a lot of work going on hand in hand in terms of who you can recruit. In some ways, competition's good for that too. It's certainly great for new young students to realize that I don't have to form a startup. I absolutely could have a nice, secure career working in government on the things that I really care and am good at.
Well, I'm afraid we have run out of time, but I thank you very much, Louis,
for
joining.
Let's keep going.
Well, actually, if you want to keep going, we have one last question. With the outsourcing to Best Shore, there are many that have been laid off. So what retraining opportunities should be explored to land a job in cybersecurity?
This is an area where, I'm a big fan of our nation's community college system. over the last 20 years, partly for demographic reasons, they've been switching to, not switching, but incorporating new focuses on lifelong learning. And there are great programs in the community college system and other kinds of the private 2-year, the DeVrys of the world, where they offer great mid-career training courses and programs on in these exact information security, cybersecurity areas. So I would definitely encourage people to check that out. I think it's partly growing. You see enrollment figures on these things really. I mentioned the double-digit growth in enrollment of these kinds of 2-year and community college programs. In part, it's growing because of the recession, exactly as the questioner is pointing out. When you have people needing to be more competitive in the marketplace to be able to land a job with 10% unemployment, I think that's a really attractive route to follow. And so I would advise checking those programs out.
Well, fantastic. Thank you again, Louis. If you liked what you heard today, I encourage you to join us at the Gov20 Expo, May 25th to the 27th. Again, Louis will be on a panel called Open Source Spying 2010. And then next week's webcast is with Bernard Golden, and we're talking about cloud computing and security. Can't we all just get along? So again, thank you all very much for joining us today. The chat room was just really fascinating, lots of really great questions. And again, Louis, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laurel. Thank you, Louis.
Thanks,
and thank
Catherine.
you, everyone else. Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Glad you could join us. So I'm going to close the chat room out in just a moment, everyone. But again, we've recorded this, and we'll send you all. Well, you'll be able to find it on our site and on the conferences site, and we'll send everyone a link as soon as the recording's available. So thanks, everyone. I'm closing. Oh, and if you get a chance, please take our post-event survey and give us a little feedback. We really appreciate it. All right, thanks.